Even though it is a relatively new sport, mixed martial arts has had more than its fair share of controversial moments. There have been numerous occurrences throughout the history of the sport where particular actions were taken and utterances were made that immediately connected negatively with the audience and the press. Surprisingly, only a few of MMA's most contentious moments happened within the octagon. Outside, all the major talking points took place. So what do you think are the most divisive events in MMA's history? Was it Israel Adesanya humping his opponent from behind after a TKO? Or was it something Dana White said? Let's take a look at some of the best ones, and we'll begin with no other person than Jon "Bones" Jones. Not that he did anything wrong, so to speak, it's just that he hates plastic UFC belts. When former UFC lightweight champion Jon "Bones" Jones said in an interview that he despised the plastic UFC belts sold in stores because the people who buy them didn't have to work hard for a belt that looked just like his, MMA message boards and forums went into a frenzy. Controversial? Perhaps not in the larger scheme of things, but it certainly irritated a lot of UFC fans and ruined Jones's humble, devout image just a little. In all honesty, I can't blame Jones for this one. Next on our list is the time when Zuffa shunned all the fighters contracted to Golden Glory. Alistair Overeem, who at the time trained at the Golden Glory gym, was the heavyweight champion of Strikeforce. However, he was later dismissed and his belt was taken away from him. After this fiasco, Zuffa cut ties with all of the fighters who trained at Golden Glory gym, with the exception of Sergey Kharitonov, of course. Casual viewers of the sport were probably thinking, Alistair who? In response to the turmoil caused by the dispute between Golden Glory and Zuffa. Dana White claimed several days later that the dispute began when Golden Glory insisted that payments be made to them rather than their fighters. To counter this, legendary MMA fighter Marlos Gonin, who also used to train at Golden Glory gym, posted an image of a check made out to her and not Golden Glory. The only thing we know for sure is that this entire chain of events was highly contentious. Now, if you thought it was just the fighters that could be controversial, then you really don't know Dana White. He's the next on our list, and you'd be unsurprised to hear that the UFC boss once received heavy backlash for making homophobic comments. In the early spring of 2009, UFC president Dana White unleashed a profanity-laced diatribe on mixed martial arts journalist Loretta Hunt and an anonymous source she cited in an article that attacked the treatment of managers in the UFC. According to the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, the iconic tirade unfortunately included an anti-gay slur that the head of a major sports organization should not be using. Dana White never directly apologized to Hunt, but Glad was successful in having the UFC head honcho apologize for his words. Although the whole incident is largely forgotten now, it cast a very negative light on the sport at the time. Rampage Jackson's motorboat gate comes in next, and the meaning of this one is obvious at a glance. Due in part to Jackson's history of being forward with female reporters, a tempest of outrage arose after he pretended to motorboat reporter Karen Bryant. Joe Rogan's cunty comment about Maggie Hendricks, a reporter who had fiercely criticized Rampage on the popular underground MMA forum, didn't help matters either. Eventually, the fans calmed down, and the shameful incident faded into MMA lore. Who remembers the post-fight disaster between Kimbo Slice and Seth Petrozelli? Well, we do. A fight between brawler and money cow Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock was scheduled to go down at Elite XC. Unfortunately, Shamrock was injured on fight day and had to pull out. The fight between heavyweight Slice and light heavyweight Seth Petrozelli was then moved from the undercard to the main event, and one of the most memorable MMA moments occurred in this fight. At 14 seconds into the bout, Petrozelli knocked out Kimbo Slice with an off-balance jab, thereby ending Elite XC's most marketable star. But what came to light after the conflict was much more disturbing. According to a radio broadcast that Yahoo Sports highlighted, Petrozelli claimed that he was asked to spar with Kimbo rather than knock him out. After reading the comments about the altercation, the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation decided to investigate. Elite XC was destroyed by negative publicity and the exposure of Kimbo Slice, despite the fact that no misconduct was found. The UFC's dismissal of Nate Marquardt is another controversial moment worth talking about. Nate, the Great Marquardt's departure from the UFC after failing to meet medical requirements sparked a whirlwind of outrage. The revelation that this was due to Nate Marquardt's use of testosterone replacement therapy, or TRT, TRT fanned the flames of controversy even further. The TRT controversy is one of the most controversial topics in sports history, since many followers view it as sanctioned dishonesty. The next controversial moment on our list brings the issue of TRT to the forefront, and that's the trial of Chael Sonnen. Many in the mixed martial arts community scoffed when it was reported that Chael Sonnen would challenge Anderson Silva for the UFC middleweight championship. This is because all of Silva's opponents, including Chael Sonnen, were written off as easy pickings, but for just 23 minutes, they were completely wrong. After weeks of vocal tirades against the champion, Chael Sonnen finally made good on his promises and battered the champion like no one else had before, getting caught in a last-minute triangle choke. Sonnen remained the center of attention in the mixed martial arts community even after the defeat, although he would have wished no one cared afterwards. What was found in his system was nothing short of incriminating. Sonnen's post-fight drug test revealed abnormally high amounts of testosterone, as was later reported. Luckily for him, his punishment was overturned after an appeal. His prosecution, however, sparked widespread debate since it brought TRT to the forefront. Sonnen was already one of the most divisive figures in the sport, and this didn't help matters. Many mixed martial arts fans were actually dissatisfied with Sonnen's punishment, which amounted to little more than a slap on the wrist. A lot of MMA followers will agree that this was not the sport's best moment. Sonnen pleading guilty to money laundering after being accused of it also came as a shock. Fans remain sharply divided on Chael Sonnen, even now that all that controversy has died down. Another contentious moment in MMA history is the Bisping versus Hamill fight. In fact, it is so controversial that one of the most egregiously terrible judgments in UFC history happened when the two men squared off against each other. Despite Hamill's overwhelming dominance, Bisping was given the victory by split decision, much to the surprise of everyone watching. The fact that Bisping's home country of the United Kingdom hosted the fight raised eyebrows even more. This will surely go down as one of the worst judging decisions in sports history. I can still hear the boos echoing from way over there. Trust me, there's no way we're going to make a video about MMA controversies without talking about Greasegate. The rematch between Georges St. Pierre and BJ Penn was one of the most highly anticipated bouts in UFC history. Penn had made a bold challenge for St. Pierre's welterweight belt, and this was surely the biggest MMA fight of that year. Fans of both men were rooting for them, but when the fight eventually began, it was St. Pierre who came out on top, as Penn was knocked out in the 5th round. After the fight, BJ Penn made an explosive charge, saying that St. Pierre was greased. The topic sparked an unprecedented level of debate among MMA fans and experts alike. The sport and its fan base take a hit whenever a major player is accused of cheating, and this was no different considering the magnitude of the fight. The Battle of Nashville will round out our list, and it will go down as one of the most controversial moments in MMA history. With his stunning upset victory over Dan Henderson at Strikeforce, few would have predicted that Jake Shields would be up in another bout even before he could go home. Miller, Shields' middleweight nemesis, grabbed the microphone during the post-fight interview and demanded a fight. What happened next was something no one expected. Strikeforce lightweight champion Gilbert Melendez stepped up and shoved Miller. But that's not all, as Strikeforce welterweight champion Nick Diaz punches Miller too. A fight broke out and all the implicated parties were given monetary penalties. Many fans actually believe that the fight is the reason Strikeforce has not been featured on CBS since.